This video would have been impossible to make when Assassin's Creed Shadows first released. In fact, this video would have been difficult to make even a week ago. That's because in this dissection of Ubisoft's biggest game in years, I'm getting into the details of what makes Shadows the game it is. Details only apparent after you spent a silly amount of hours with the game, unlocked near enough all the weapons, and seen pretty much everything it has to offer. So, was Assassin's Creed Shadows actually worth the hype? That's the question I'll be answering in this video. And to do that, I'm looking in depth at all of its main elements. The combat, the story, the world, and also at those little annoyances that don't seem big at first, but after 100 hours really start to aggravate. And the biggest one for me is the issue I'm going to be kicking the video off with. This is environmental traversal. In short, going off-road has promoted some of the most frustrating moments I've ever experienced in Assassin's Creed. If you try and attempt to travel directly to your objective, you'll often run into steep hills and thick undergrowth, both of which impede your progress. Climb up a hill and you'll slide back down. Get into dense foliage and your screen is completely obscured. And Lord help you if the sun goes down. This robs the game of the joy of shortcuts. And by that I mean forging your own path to objectives. Instead, the game wants you to stick to roads. In fact, it even tells you this in loading screens as a tip. But I don't want to always stick to roads. Roads are boring. They're long and straight and go in one direction. And if you take a wrong turn, then you have to retrace your steps and go all the way back. But you have to use roads in Shadows because environmental traversal has been massively reduced. In Odyssey, you could climb up anything in the game, from steep hills and sheer cliffs that go straight up. You were free to explore however you want, going at 360 degrees in all directions. By comparison, Shadows feels restrictive. The map is bisected with so-called acceptable travel routes and ways it wants you to go. And there are extra elements that exacerbate this. One of these was the lack of auto move while on horseback, which meant you had to control your horse through minutes of riding in a straight line. But thankfully, now Ubisoft has patched in auto move, so let's skip past this. The big problem currently for me that makes exploration worse, and actually the wider game in general, is your inability to control time. You can't, for instance, alter the day and night cycle and change it from day to night like you could in previous games. And this makes it so half the time I'm playing the game, it's night time. And this game is not good at night. Actually, most games aren't good at night. They look worse, they're hard to see, and everything's dark. Why, oh why would I ever want to play at night? And then added to that, the previous issue I mentioned, which is how you have to scramble through thick foliage whenever you go off-road, and you've turned this game into one of those massage experiences where you close your eyes while big men hit you with leaves. So those are two problems with Shadows that started off small but morphed into my biggest issues with the game. But that's not to say exploration and traversal as a whole are bad. Parkour here in particular feels vastly different to any Assassin's Creed game in history. Naoe is the fastest protagonist ever, and she has more unique moves than any Creed protagonist. You can flip between buildings, go prone to avoid discovery, and grapple up to high points with your grappling hook. It has to be said, in the man-made areas, however. And this is the key distinction. So while towns and cities feel absolutely made for an Assassin's Creed game, its rural areas feel like an antithesis. In other words, they come from a different game. A game that doesn't let you navigate them properly. So Shadows, in terms of exploration anyway, is a game of two halves. You have the man-made areas and the more open rural areas. But let's get to what I love about the game, combat. Combat in Shadows is a dream. It manages the trick of looking like an expertly crafted fight from an action movie, while being sharp and responsive, with your character fully in control of all the moves and animations, no matter how exaggerated. If I can level something at the game here that only really applies after 50 hours or so, it is the lack of finishing moves. Each weapon only seems to have 2 or 3 moves, and you'll see them several times over the course of even one encounter. Stretch that out over 50 hours and you'll see the same moves again and again. But it feels unfair to rag on Shadows too much for this, because each weapon has its own huge move list, special abilities, and fully fledged skill tree. And you are encouraged to use every skill. So I never felt like I've only got enough points to put into 1 or 2 weapons. I can spec out all of them. This means I'm using all of the weapons and therefore expanding the possible move list I'm able to pull off. Ultimately, I judge combat in any game by a single criteria. Do I want to fight enemies? If given the choice, will I skip to the next skirmish? And in Shadows, that answer is no. I never find myself at a point where I intentionally want to skip past any fight, no matter how many enemies. It simply is that damn fun. I'm always unlocking new weapons with better stats, experimenting with new playstyles, and combining different engravings to make creative builds. For instance, with Yasuke, I combined the engraving that gives you suppressed fire on your Teppo with the engraving that gives you more damage over distance. This created a sniper build. There's also an engraving that makes it so you're impossible to interrupt when charging your Kanebo. Combine this with the engraving that makes you charge your Kanebo faster, and I'm able to reel off charge attacks at high speed. And this is what makes combat great, the variety and the style. And this is why the missions in Shadows also never get old. So let's talk about the missions, and why for me they are so effective at what they do.
It was my fault. Like I wasn't enough.
What did you do in those moments?
I leaned on friends.
It's because they all play to the game's strengths. These are stealth and combat. Missions don't try and introduce gimmicks or novelties, they just do the basics really, really well. It's often about entering an outpost or a compound and taking out either one target or a series of targets. It's just this over and over again. But it doesn't get old. In fact, it gets better as time goes on. I'll give you an example of this in practical terms. For the first 10 hours or so, I was using Naoe to sneak into places and quietly assassinate targets. Then I would get out and try and not raise any alarms. But I wanted to breathe some variety into it, so I started choosing Yasuke, who handles completely differently. This is like 2 separate games. His moveset is different, his power and health bars are improved, and he has an altogether different movement style that radically alters how you play. Simply put, what I think really works about Shadows is that this is a game that gives you the tools to play in different ways, and crucially, all of those ways feel just as fun as each other. When I started developing Yasuke's skills, he got more and more powerful. It didn't matter that he raised the alarm every time he burst through the front door. I was just having fun smashing people over the head with my Kanebo, or punting them 10 feet through the air. So yeah, even though the mission types are repetitive, the way you can approach them really isn't. That said, I wasn't a fan of the game's story. The reason for that is, it just failed to hold my interest. I went in with the best intentions, paying attention to every cutscene and item description, but honestly I did find myself skipping cutscenes after a few hours. There were just too many and they went on way too long.
わしの集めた珍品を見たようじゃな。
あの茶道具は誠に見事。
Naoe for me is kind of a bland character, and while Yasuke is a bit more interesting, the game's writers take way too long saying what they need to say. There is easily hours upon hours of cutscenes in this game. I would say at least 10 hours, or that's what it feels like, and sitting through all of them takes more patience than I'm willing to give. And on top of that, there are just way too many characters. In a movie or TV series, we're asked to remember a handful of characters, both antagonist and protagonist. That is manageable. In this game though, there are hundreds. After a while, they start to blend together. It's hard to care about the procession of random generals, military leaders, farmers, samurai, castle owners, and other characters, whether minor or major. It's possible to have this long list of characters in some games though. There are plenty of open world games with a long list of memorable characters, like The Witcher or Dark Souls, Skyrim, Red Dead Redemption 2, etc. But for me, the characters in Shadows, and to a larger extent the story, don't make an impact. But finally, let's talk about something that does make an impact: the world. For me, this is easily the most impressive open world in Assassin's Creed yet. And I'm someone with not much of an initial interest in this time period or setting. Syndicate was more interesting for me because I live in London, but on a visual level, it's hard to deny Shadows is more beautiful. Climbing up to an Eagle Point is always an arresting sight because you can fully see across the map. You can't skip it when the camera revolves around your character, but most of the time you literally don't want to. The game world is incredibly diverse height-wise, with plenty of verticality, which explains why it's so hard to traverse on foot. But this is the payoff: getting to gaze across a map filled with hills and cliffs that look every bit as majestic as the real thing. It doesn't matter that you can't really climb up them, they look great. And that's without getting into seasons, which are a way bigger feature than I was expecting. Each season transforms the map, whether it's winter causing lakes to ice over, or cherry blossoms coming out in spring. This is a world affected by the passage of time, giving the game an epic quality. And that goes for the weather as well. There's every type of weather you could think of here, from dense fog you could cut with a knife, to tropical thunderstorms, to frigid blizzards that coat your outfit in snow. The passing of time is really well represented. There's also tons of different lighting models here, so an early evening in spring, for instance, has this sort of natural purple haze, and this looks completely different to an early evening in winter, which is darker and more of a cold blue shade. To make a world this large and detailed is a feat, but to completely have it alter depending on the weather, season and time of day is incredible. I can't remember a game that goes this far with the seasons and the weather, changing how the world looks, but also how you interact with it as well. So those are my updated thoughts on Assassin's Creed Shadows, a game that's this rare thing of still being as good as it was the day it came out, if not better, a month on from release. But these are just my opinions. I want to hear from you. What do you think of Shadows after some time with the game? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and for more Assassin's Creed content, subscribe to the channel.